Right. We're off. We're going to. It's off to Sarah and Robert. So Sarah was diagnosed with ADHD 23 years old, overcoming many challenges. She's now a JNC qualified youth worker, qualified counsellor, accredited 5-step practitioner. She's several years experience working in the field of addiction and recovery in resident rehabilitation, custodial and community settings. She's worked for Game Care for 4 years and now manages a team of specialist practitioners delivering their gambling support interventions across London. Game Care is a leading provider of gambling advice, information, support. They treat up to 10,000 clients a year under its gambling support services, and they receive 40,000 calls to the National Gambling Helpline. So it's a big area. And we've got Robert Neiman. Robert was diagnosed with ADHD at 21 years old. He knew he had it from a young age, but it was only when he started university he needed an official diagnosis. He started gambling-related harm at around 20 years old before ADHD diagnosis, but didn't realise or understand the harm he was causing to himself and anyone for a number of years. He's been in recovery for 4 years. So now we've gone from basically talking about alcohol and recovery there, and we're now moving over. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Robert.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Yeah, good to be here. And blown away by the guy earlier. He was amazing. Yeah. I have to say, I really advocate for the ice baths, Henry. You've got to get on that because they're amazing. Really, really amazing.
No, not you as well.
Honestly, it's the wall.
Robert, are you ice bathing? Like, is this something you do? He's quiet.
Can you hear us, Robbie?
Oh, me? No, I don't do ice baths, no.
Okay, good. You're like, you and I will stick together. This is a worrying trend. And most worrying aspect of it is that people seem to really think it's good, and it just might be.
It is.
Right. Do you want to tell us about you guys? Like, Sarah, do you want to start? Tell us about you and what you're doing and what you want to tell people.
So I work for GamCare, and I started there in December 2019, working as a recovery practitioner. Working with people that were experiencing gambling harms for at various different levels, and now I have the privileged position of managing the London part of the London team. So we're out there delivering interventions and support to people that experience gambling related harms, all across London. And actually, GamCare is part of the National Gambling Support Network. So, it's a big, umbrella of various different organisations supporting people all over the UK. So that's a bit about me. I'm diagnosed ADHD, as you mentioned earlier. And yeah, I'm here to talk a bit about the link between gambling and ADHD. But I don't know if we want to hear from Robbie before I go on anymore.
Go on, let's hear from Robbie, then let's talk about the link.
Yeah, so I would have maybe started gambling around 19, 20 years old, and it was always like scratch cards on and off at the beginning, but then whenever I found roulette, that's when it really kicked off. I hadn't been diagnosed yet by the time I started gambling, but it was pretty evident from when I was young because I had the tests done, but I felt like I didn't want to be different or anything when I was that young. So it was marked inconclusive at that time. But yeah, whenever I started playing roulette, it was about a year before I started uni, and it would have been within a year. It was just constant. One more time, but it was never one more. It was just a cycle, telling myself I'll never do it again. But doing it was the next payday without fail. And having all the best intentions of keeping it at a minimum, but they've always ended up at a maximum. But with the ADHD diagnosis, it was 21 and started uni because I always needed extra time in exams in school because of it. So whenever they did the tests, they marked it inconclusive when I was a kid, but said he still needs extra time in exams. But when I started uni, they basically said that obviously it's a bit more official. They needed an official diagnosis. I wasn't worried about whether I would have it or not, because I knew for a fact that I had it. It was just about getting it on paper. But yeah, the gambling took away all the negative emotions from ADHD, mood swings. It was just, I was escaped in my own reality, and it was somewhat inner peace whilst I was there. But when all the money was gone, it was just chaos, and all your problems came back 10 times worse than they were before. And yeah, one of the most difficult things to stop. I've made it here 4 years on, so I'm just taking one day at a time. And yeah, thanks.
Well, look, congrats on, obviously that's a huge congrats. Sarah, do you want to talk to us about the link? And then it'd be interesting to ask Robert about like how he felt his ADHD intersected with the gambling. And so over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of kind of prevalence data, there's not loads. We know a bit more about addiction, the link between, other addictions and ADHD, because I think, there's been more research done, essentially. I think it's a reasonably kind of new thing that people are thinking about. So there's not loads, but what we do know from the studies that have been done. So there is approximately 20% of people that have an issue with gambling also have ADHD. And there was a study done in Australia in a treatment service, I think in Melbourne. And what that found was almost, I think it was 24.9% of the people there that were seeking treatment from that service screened positively for ADHD. So they weren't necessarily diagnosed with ADHD, but they certainly screened positively. So that tells us that statistically, if you have ADHD, then you are more likely to develop a gambling problem. Or if you gamble, then you're more likely to do so harmfully. So in terms of the link between gambling and ADHD, so we know that, ADHD, obviously, I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone here, but it's linked to a kind of deficit in dopamine. So obviously that's the chemical that's responsible for focus, activity levels, pleasure and motivation. But it's also produced when we experience a reward. And that's the important part, because gambling involves an intermittent reward system. So this is a reward that's delivered at irregular intervals rather than at predictable, continuous intervals. And these reward systems, these intermittent reward systems, are extremely addictive. So the intervals are random, and this increases the anticipation of excitement around winning. So a lot of people would actually assume that the hook of gambling can be solely down to the financial reward. But clever imaging of the brain actually shows us that it's the same areas of the brain light up when we're actually anticipating the reward. So the brain doesn't really register the difference between waiting and receiving. And it feels like there's always a reward that's just around the corner. So as a result, people get really highly invested in this reward system and obviously try harder and longer and more persistently to earn those rewards. So in terms of the impact for people with ADHD, because the increase in dopamine can make people feel really focused, which is obviously quite a nice feeling if you're somebody that struggles in terms of keeping focus on things. So when anyone that's got ADHD can probably identify with that feeling of feeling quite hyper fixated and hyper focused on something. It's actually quite enjoyable. I certainly really like it when I get stuck into something. So we imagine that there's something that increases that dopamine and makes people feel really hooked in and kind of live and online, that this is really appealing to somebody that has ADHD. So in terms of some of the other risks, and I think Robbie and I have had conversations before about the online gambling and how that can really kind of like up the ante in terms of the kind of pervasiveness of the harmful gambling. And online gambling really increases the risk of harm because it's really easy to access. It's there whenever you want it. It's at your fingertips. There's no natural break. So at kind of betting shops, they close eventually. But with online gambling, people can literally access all day, all night, and there isn't those kind of like natural breaks where the shop shuts. So this kind of non-stop access to gambling at all times, throughout the day and night, makes it really hard for people to stop, and particularly people who struggle with things like impulse control. Is that kind of cover? I feel like I've talked an awful lot there.
That was wonderful, and I think it's probably be interesting to talk to Robbie about Well, it was that part you talked about, that the dopamine that you get when gambling gives you focus, like, and like certainly I recognize, particularly in my pre-diagnosis days, that I was doing things because I got peace with some focus. Like otherwise, my brain is racing all the time, and so I'd find these activities which would give me some peace, and actually that was wonderful. And obviously now I understand that much more. What for you is the intersection of ADHD and your gambling, Robbie? I feel like I do radio work, and I discover I have this huge pause between when I speak, and it's terrifying for the people interviewing. I feel like on the other side. Robbie, over to you. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. You were freezing a bit there. I thought you asked me to speak. Yeah, I think around the impulse control is just nerds who completely takes over. Nowadays, I know for a fact if I went and put one bet on, that would be me. It would spiral out of control. Maybe not instantly, but it would definitely get there. Focus wise, yeah, I could, when I was standing at a roulette machine or doing it on my phone, it was a case of just completely focused on that. If people were talking to me, which probably wouldn't have really happened so much because it was a thing where it was just me. It's like a lonely addiction. You don't really be around other people when you're doing it. But yeah, if I was completely focused on that spinning ball or focused on the gambling, then after that, someone was talking with me. If I just lost a month's wage or lost so and so, people would be talking to me, and I wouldn't really, not that I wouldn't understand what they're saying, but I wouldn't register. I wouldn't have focused on real life conversations or scenarios. It was just, yeah, it's a difficult one then. And I think towards the end, yeah, to start, winning was great. You were getting a buzz from it, you were getting big dopamine. But to be honest, towards the end, it didn't really matter if I won or lost. If anything, if I say, for example, I went in with a month's wage and nearly lost it all, and then suddenly you nearly got that amount back very quickly. I'd forgot about all the negativity that just happened about nearly losing it all. It was all about just being in that moment. And I think it was towards the end, I was like an escape where as long as there was still credit in the machine or online or what, or even with scratch cards, as long as I was still able to do it, it didn't really matter if I won or lost. It's like money was like ammunition to just keep going and going. And yeah, I'm not going to say I never won because it did, but the money was never good to me because that's what it was, ammunition to keep going. Even if it was taken out that night, the next day or the week. You can probably tell where the money went as well. Yeah, I paid my bills and stuff, but I knew like my car and stuff, I always made sure I paid for everything. And I never missed payments, but to me, the extra whatever was left over, it was just, yeah. Does that answer your question?
No, we've asked people to submit questions via globaladhd.com or go to adhduk.co.uk and click through to the conference. So there have been some issues with uptime on that. Someone asked, can you suggest a healthy way for an ADHDer struggling with addiction to replace the dopamine hit from gambling? And actually, I think there's a sub-question there, which is that what you need to aim to do? Do you need to replace the dopamine with something else?
Is that for me?
Yeah. For either, I suppose.
I mean, I think so. The thing is, when we are, engaging in an activity which gives us a reward, it feels really good. So what tends to happen is that we will invest heavily in that particular pathway. So we will repeat that behavior to get, the pretty much guaranteed source of dopamine or pleasure that we crave. And I think over time, what happens is that we become heavily reliant on that one particular pathway and actually forget, you know, that there may be other things that would also perhaps not give us the immediate reward, but actually would give us a reward. So over time, you know, those pathways weaken, and the pathway to the, you know, to the perhaps unhealthy strategy becomes kind of more deeply ingrained. So, you know, everybody comes with recovery capital, everybody, you know, whether you're in recovery or not, actually, we've all got capital. So if we think about a person as you know, having unique and special and different recovery capital, we need to consider what they are. And I've worked with people that have you know, been, you know, really, really in a bad way, and you think they've got no recovery capital. Recovery capital are the things that we have about us that we can use to improve our situation and get better and build upon. And I've worked with people that have been homeless, and you know, really, really, they, you know, appear to have very little, but everybody has capital. So it's about realizing what your capital is. So your capital will be your unique characteristics. It might even be your ADHD. You know, it will be where you live, you know, the people around you. It might even be a pet. It will be your community. It will be your culture, perhaps even your race or your religion. It can, you know, every single thing about you, your work, your special interests, you know, your fitness levels, your health. So it's about thinking about what your capital is and actually using that to better yourself. And I personally think people with ADHD do have a bit of a disadvantage in some respects because of that dopamine need. But actually, you know, there is that propensity to get very hooked into something. And it's about using that to their advantage.
Yeah, and as part of this is that, like, I think I spoke about it in the previous interview, that point that the research I've seen, which showed that gambling, propensity to gamble, same ADHD population, non-ADHD population, but the probability of being in the problem gambler and severe problem gambler category for ADHD is much, much higher. That your level of danger essentially is much, much higher. Talked about recovery capital. I think, Robbie, like, what was your recovery capital?
I think, well, to be honest, at the start, when I first started the recovery, it was more about just stopping. I started going to GA meetings, and I felt like for about 6 months, that was my main focus, not to gamble. But I knew that if I wanted to continue that way, I needed to get something. Swimming, that sort of thing, just getting out and doing something that you used to. For anyone struggling, I would recommend going out and doing something that you used to enjoy, because whenever you're in the midst of gambling will take over things, like things you used to do, like music and stuff. Listen to songs that mean something to you, that sort of thing. But yeah, for everyone, I think it's individual. Just find something that gambling took from you and take it back.
Wow, that's love. That's very emotional advice. Like, it's deep. Like, we're out of time, and like in conference 2022, I thought it was charming and amusing to run slightly late as an ADHD conference, because I was like, we're ADHD, of course we're running late. Ha ha ha. No, like, because then I hit some pre-records and suddenly like for us, like some of our major people, I was like dramatically late, and I couldn't do anything about it because I had pre-records. So I'm trying very hard to stick to time and catch up where we have. So I have to call it a day there. You guys have been interested. Like, that's so emotional and interesting, and thank you so much for being so open and honest, and thank you for being here. It's a huge deal for us, and very much appreciated. Thank you.
I just realised share a slide right at the end there. Can I just quickly just flash that up, and maybe people can take a screenshot or something so that people can see that?
Yes, although it's not showing, but we'll give it a go. Okay.
Is it?
Yeah, no, it's just coming over as a black rectangle.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry about that.
That's all right. No worries. I mean, yeah. If you search the National Gambling Helpline, Do you know what? I'm not going to be able to even. I know it off by heart, but there's no way I'm going to attempt that right now either. So, but yeah, you know, like so you get to GA, reach out for support.
In the background, I'm trying very, very hard to show your slide, and it's possible, people. It's just about possible that I've succeeded. Like it is important. So you do it, Sarah, come on, because it's yours.
Yeah. So GamCare. So the website there. There's loads of information there around self-exclusion, all different sort of tools that can keep you safer. Help create distance between your gambling thought and your gambling action. You know, you can get lots and lots of support. You can get, you know, gambling recovery support from GamCare. You've got the National Gambling Helpline, which is 0808 802 0133. And then more information about the wider National Gambling Support Network at Be Gambler Aware there. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful and insightful for people. But don't be alone.
Thank you. And you should have seen some flashing up. So lots of thank yous coming from people who are watching on the different platforms. And for those watching, you can obviously watch directly on globaladhd.com. You can also watch on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And we are seeing your comments come in. And thank you for those who submitted the questions, which we attempted to ask. You guys have been great. Good luck on your continued journeys. And Robbie, congrats on what you've achieved. It's a big deal and extraordinarily hard to do. So, Sarah, your work is obviously amazing. Right, I've got to go.
Thank you so much.
Now 2 minutes late. And the secret thing I know is that this next segment, it's supposed to be 30 minutes and it's not. It's 32, I think. And so I'll be catching up some minutes in a later segment. Wonderful. Thank you, guys. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much.